The news hit Abigail the hardest. Those last moments played in her mind over and over again. Uncle Edward had just come home from the Greatest Catch, a shop he owned and ran within the sleepy village of Elmwood, Nova Scotia. Abigail sat on a beige couch in the living room. She had been home from work a few hours prior with her nose in a mystery novel, dressed in pajamas. Fatigue dropped Edward's eyes as he slumped into his black leather chair in the living room. That was rough. He sighed more than said. Everything all right, Uncle? Abigail asked. God, I hate the French, he muttered. Especially Quebecers. Ugh. He wiped the sweat off his forehead with the sleeve of a green vintage suit. What happened? Business. Too much? Too little? The Comers think their garbage is worth a fortune? Nah, nothing you need to worry about. Is it warm in here? Not really. Edward stood up, his cheeks partially inflated. I'm going to take a cold shower and turn in early. Night, Abby. Good night, Ed. Had she had known that moment would be the last time she ever spoke to Edward, Abigail would have pressed him about the business, everything she would need to know to run the shop, even simply, I love you, thank you for taking me in when my mother and father died. Instead, she let him go. A few hours later, she put her book away on the shelf and walked into her own bedroom. She peered into her bedroom window, swearing a white, pupilless glare that stared back. There is nothing there, she said to herself as she slipped underneath the covers of her bed. That morning she woke up before her uncle did. He was always up first to cook breakfast. This fact nagged her into strolling up the stairs and down the hall to Edward's bedroom. She knocked. No response. Shaky hands started tapping on the wooden door as she debated whether to try waking him up. It wasn't because she couldn't cook. 28 years she knew her way around a frying pan. So unlike Ed, she thought as she knocked again. No response. She leaned her head against the double door, drew in some deep breaths, and opened it into a master bedroom. The room, carpeted with paintings of sea creatures on the walls, laid out too still. The white and blue sheets were not moved. Uncle Ed? Abigail called into the room. Everything okay? Silence. Eddie? She approached the bed. Edward lay there under the blankets. Her hands shook as she gave him a shake. Ed? Didn't the shop need to be opened? Ed? Ed! She violently shook him. When he didn't so much as resist and moan, she laid her index and middle finger onto his neck. The rest of it was a blur. From being unable to find a pulse, to dialing 911 in a panic, to sirens, the ambulance, and the announcement from the doctor at Eastern Shore Memorial declaring that Edward Morris was deceased. No sign of foul play. The death certificate listed it as natural causes. The week that followed was a rush of planning and preparations, notifying the local paper, and leaving voicemail for what little contact information she could find for family, all leading up to sitting in the church, listening to Father Nelson and Mayor Thompson give speeches too dull to note. She left the church to watch the pallbearers carry him into the cemetery. Standing in a customary black dress, she kept her tears to her. It felt all too real when the casket was lowered into the ground and dirt was shoveled on top of it. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The casket lowered into the ground, and the crowd marched to the Norwell Public House and Inn, a pub in town frequented by the locals and strangers alike.